Let me start with a powerful confession from one of the greatest spiritual leaders of all time, the Apostle Paul. He once wrote, "I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do." Sound familiar? If you've ever found yourself trapped in a cycle you deeply despise, if you've ever promised God you'd change only to fall back into the same struggle, especially with lust, you're not alone. Paul's words echo the battle so many of us silently fight. But here's something I need you to hear clearly. Your struggle might not be a sign of spiritual failure. It might be proof that God has a deeper purpose for your life. You see, most messages out there will tell you, just try harder, stop sinning, control yourself. But today, I want to offer you something different, something deeper. What if I told you that your battle with lust isn't just a weakness, but a doorway to something divine? Stick with me, because by the end of this message, you'll never look at your struggle the same way again. Now let's pause and look at something that's been hiding in plain sight throughout the Bible, a divine pattern that most people miss. Have you noticed that the ones God chooses for extraordinary purposes often face extraordinary temptations? Think about it. David, called a man after God's own heart, fell into lust with Bathsheba. Joseph, chosen to save entire nations, was relentlessly pursued by Potiphar's wife. And Samson, gifted with supernatural strength, repeatedly found himself entangled with women who led him away from God's plan. These aren't just random moral failures. No, they're spiritual indicators. They show us a principle. The greater the calling, the greater the confrontation. If you're facing strong temptation, especially in the area of lust, it might not mean you're weak. It might mean you're marked, chosen. The enemy doesn't waste his attacks on people who pose no threat. He aims for the ones carrying spiritual weight. So let me ask you this. If your struggle isn't a sign that you're failing, could it be a sign that you're being prepared for something much bigger? Here's a question for you. If you were the enemy and you knew someone had the potential to shake the kingdom of darkness, would you leave them alone? Of course not. You wouldn't waste time attacking people going nowhere. You'd aim right at the point of impact, the place where their God-given purpose could do the most damage to your plans. And that's exactly what the enemy does. He targets your influence, your calling, your destiny. And often, he does it through lust, because it hits at the core of your identity, your purity, your confidence. The truth is, the intensity of your temptation might be a clue to the intensity of your calling. It's not always about how weak you are, it's about how dangerous you are to the enemy. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by temptation, don't just ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask instead, "What is the enemy so afraid of that he's fighting this hard to stop me?" That question might just shift everything. Let me share with you one of the most personal and powerful moments in Scripture. The Apostle Paul, yes, the same Paul who wrote much of the New Testament, confessed that he was given what he called a thorn in the flesh. We don't know exactly what it was. Some say it was physical pain, others believe it was deep spiritual temptation. But here's what we do know. Paul pleaded with God 3 times to take it away. And God said no, but not out of cruelty. God answered him with these words, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. Let that sink in. God didn't remove the struggle, because the struggle had a purpose. It kept Paul humble, dependent, grounded in grace. And maybe, just maybe, that's what your struggle is doing too. What if your weakness isn't meant to disqualify you, but to deepen your connection with God, to protect you from pride, to keep you close? Paul didn't just endure his weakness, he embraced it, because in his lowest moments, he discovered the highest power. You know what's comforting? Even the spiritual giants, the ones whose names are etched in history, didn't have it all together. Take St. Augustine, one of the most brilliant minds in Christian theology. He once prayed, "Lord, make me pure, but not yet." That's raw honesty. He wanted to be holy, but he also wanted time to wrestle with his flesh. C.S. Lewis, the man who gave us Mere Christianity and the Chronicles of Narnia, described himself as having a zoo of lusts raging inside. He didn't hide his struggle. He admitted it shaped the man he became. And even Mother Teresa, the face of compassion, confessed that she walked through long seasons of spiritual darkness, times when she felt completely disconnected from the God she served so faithfully. But here's the truth that ties them all together. It wasn't the absence of struggle that defined them. It was the way they responded to it. Their battles didn't disqualify them, they deepened them. They didn't pretend to be perfect. They stayed surrendered, humble, and dependent on grace. So if you're struggling right now, you're not falling behind. You're walking a road well-worn by the greats. Now, recognizing that you're chosen is just the beginning. The real question is, how will you respond? If your battle with lust or any internal struggle is connected to a higher calling, then your response could shape your entire spiritual legacy. Let me share with you 4 powerful responses that separate the merely called from the truly chosen. 1. Recognize the attack for what it is. When temptation intensifies, don't just react, reflect. Ask yourself, what part of God's purpose in my life is under attack right now? Is it your ability to lead, your future marriage, your influence on others? James 1:2-4 tells us to consider it pure joy when you face trials. Why? Because these trials are training grounds. They're building perseverance, maturity, depth. 2. Transform shame into sacred awareness. Most people fight shame with silence or willpower, but there's a better way. Paul said, "I boast in my weakness." Why? Because that's where God's power shows up. Your struggle isn't a reason to hide from God. It's an invitation to run toward Him. Let your weakness become the place where grace meets you. 3. Weaponize your wounds. 2 Corinthians 1:4 says, God comforts us so that we can comfort others. That means your pain has a purpose. What if the very area where you were once defeated becomes the platform where you set others free? 4. Embrace grace-powered discipline. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15:10, "By the grace of God, I am what I am, yet I worked harder than all of them." Grace doesn't make you passive. It empowers your discipline. Read scripture, set boundaries, surround yourself with accountability, not because you're trying to earn God's love, but because you're living in the strength of it. These 4 responses are how the chosen rise, not by being perfect, but by being purposeful, even in their weakness. Let me leave you with this thought, one that could shift your entire perspective. What if your struggle with lust isn't proof that you're drifting away from God, but proof that you're drawing closer? See, most people think that falling into temptation means they failed. But Romans 8:28-29 reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, even in the mess, even in the mistakes. Look at King David. He fell hard. Lust, adultery, betrayal. And yet, out of that failure came Psalm 51, one of the most raw, repentant, and powerful prayers in Scripture. A prayer that has comforted and restored millions across generations. That's what grace does. It takes your darkest chapter and rewrites it into a testimony. So today, I'm not asking you to pray harder to be free. I'm asking you to pray differently. This week, I challenge you to ask, God, show me the purpose behind this struggle. Reveal what you're shaping in me through it. Because maybe your pain isn't the end of your story. Maybe it's the beginning of your calling. And where you see weakness, God sees someone He's preparing for something extraordinary.